last 2 weeks, have you found yourself wishing that governments around the world had spent more money on pandemic preparedness than Hollywood spends on depicting disasters on TV and in movies? Welcome to Audiobook Reviews in 5. This is Jana, also known as Yana, and today I'm reviewing Deadliest Enemy, Our War Against Killer Germs by Michael T. Osterholm and Mark Olshaker, and read by Jamie Rennell. Aside from the obvious timeliness of the subject matter in this book, I chose to listen after I heard Dr. Osterholm interviewed on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, which was released on March 10th, just one day before the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 pandemic on March 11th. Osterholm is an American infectious disease epidemiologist, professor, and director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota. And on March 9th, he published a really important but especially alarming study by researchers in Germany on how COVID-19 can be spread before it causes symptoms. Listening to that podcast and reading that article convinced me to take even bolder steps than I might otherwise have taken, and I'm glad I did so. Turning back to the book, which seems like dramatic foreshadowing in retrospect, is a discussion and examination of SARS and MERS, two other lethal coronaviruses. I personally remember the severe acute respiratory syndrome outbreak in Toronto in 2002 and 2003, and worldwide, SARS led to more than 8,000 infections and killed close to 10% of those it infected. Now, it may seem that 8,000 cases is a mere drop in the bucket compared to COVID-19, but at the time it was terrifying to many, which makes our current predicament hard to contextualize. A deeply disappointing element of the criticism of this book is just how many people described it as a wake-up call when it was published in 2017. Yet cuts to pandemic preparedness budgets continued nevertheless, as we're now learning. The authors pose a hypothetical pandemic crisis description that is scarily prescient of our own current situation. And if the authors of this book get some small, bitter satisfaction on being right, I can only imagine how they must be wringing their hands and shaking their heads after trying so valiantly to educate the public on the inevitable. And now, here we are. An important detail repeated throughout the book is that, yes, public health professionals and experts will, and should change their messaging and communications about emerging infectious diseases as more information becomes available for discussion and review. And illustrations of this type of evolution make the audiobook especially compelling as the authors share historic examples of cholera, toxic shock syndrome, and even Ebola. The audio narration by Jamie Rennell makes this audiobook a riveting listen. So I encourage you to check out the format if it's available to you. And on a side note, my favorite comment on Goodreads comes from a reviewer named Mirsa, who says, quote, "Everyone, especially policymakers, should go back in time immediately and read this book, like a few years ago," unquote. Still, it's not too late to get educated about this critical topic. And that's why I think this book is so important. We need informed people now more than ever. And here's the thing, even after the worst of this pandemic rides out, we're still facing some unprecedented public health risks, like increasing antibiotic resistance, which isn't going away without a fight. My sincere hope is that the current situation motivates dramatic action to prevent the next surge of infectious disease. That's all for this episode of Audiobook Reviews in 5. Thanks for listening. I look forward to checking in with you all again soon. Please stay safe and be well.